And we're very fortunate today to have Ákos with us, who's associated with Friends of the Earth in Hungary. And he's going to go on and talk a little bit, as I said, about some of the challenges around SDGs and environmental projects and maybe post-COVID too. So if you can hear us, Ákos, I can see you on screen. If you're happy to take over, if you need any assistance, let me know. And that's really great. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'm happy to be here and talk about these issues. My name is Ákos Éger, and I will talk about a little bit about myself and our organizations in the presentation, and I hope that I can start soon. Yes. Okay. So hopefully you see my presentation now. And I've got the invitation from Ákos Klein, and he asked me to talk about SDGs, the post-COVID economy, environmental issues, linked of these, and he asked me, or he allowed me to, that I can be critical, so I will be, but I want to underline that I think it's good that we have the SDGs, and nothing can change that. And SDGs are good for a lot of different issues, but for me, SDGs are a hook to talk about sustainable development with people, with organizations, with governments, basically with everyone. So for me, the best of the SDGs that it's put these issues on the table, and now I can talk about it, for example, on this occasion. During my presentation, I will have a short introduction about me and the organization mainly I represent. I will talk about SDGs, and as I said, these are a hook for me, so then I will talk about policy coherence and what are the problems of nowadays environmental policies, and what are we failing to achieve our environmental goals. And then, of course, not just the negative side, but the positive, what kind of solution I see could bring us closer to our environmental and other goals in this field. So, on one hand, I'm representing Friends of the Earth Hungary. I'm the executive president of the organization. The organization is more than 30 years old. We are based in Budapest, but our member groups, we have more than 110 member groups, are based throughout the country in Hungary. And we like to say about our organization that we are radical in our principles, not in our actions, but in our principles, that we want to find the drivers and the cause of the environmental problems, and we don't want to draw the attention for those drivers, and we want to solve the drivers and not the environmental problems themselves. And we also like networking and cooperating. As I said, we have a lot of member groups, and we are also part of national networks and international networks like Friends of the Earth, European Environmental Group, Eurodad, Sea Bankwatch Network, and others. And for example, such kind of network we just established in 2017 with other 10 organizations is the Hungarian NGO Roundtable for Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in 2015. We had a lot of activities in Hungary around the SDGs. Some of the member groups of the Roundtable even worked on SDGs before the adoption, tried to shape the content of the SDGs. Immediately in 2015, we started to work on it, making proposals how SDGs could be implemented in Hungary. We tried to push the government to do it. But not a lot of things happened. And then in 2017, we decided we try to push more in the form of this roundtable, and now we have 15 organizations in the roundtable. We are not aiming for a lot of organizations because we think that still sustainable development as such is not really clear and could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So we also want to build a coherent understanding among the organizations of the Roundtable, what is sustainable development. But we are also, of course, also going to the public, going to decision makers, having conferences, publications, and we are going forward. We were also invited to make comments and write in the voluntary national review of the Hungarian government, which is reporting the SDGs to the United Nations. First of all, I would like to start with the good news that we have the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goal, one document, so to say, to rule them all. And it's good that we do not have separate development and separate sustainable development documents, strategies on global level, but we have more or less one document. We have another one, global one on financing for development, but that's a side issue. So we have one document and that's good. So far, we have had different global strategies like the MDGs, Agenda 21, Sustainable Development Program, but we couldn't say that those documents was coherent at all with each other, not only the strategies, but also for the implementation. For example, if you take the Millennium Development Goals, a lot of big success, huge success were related to the MDGs. For example, the child mortality decreased from more than 12 million to 6 million in 5 years during the implementation of the MDGs, or the reduction of extreme poverty. It was also a success story that time. But if we take a look on the environmental impact of those successes, that is a failure. So meanwhile, we had success on social issues. This put a lot of additional burden on the environmental for those success. And although the comparison between the ring and the SDGs looks good, but we have to be honest, at least one aspect is not true in that comparison, that the ring has the real power above other rings. And sadly, Agenda 2030 does not have that power. So that's the good news that we have it, but we have to also acknowledge that there are a lot of incoherences in Agenda 2030 and in the Sustainable Development Goals. And just the most obvious one, there are goals that wants to achieve to stop the loss of biodiversity or decrease energy consumption. But on the other hand, there are goals which are fostering economic growth or global trade. Of course, it's more difficult than that. But for me, those kind of goals are not really coherent with each other. And that's why there are a lot of thinking about how to make it coherent and linking the different goals to work for each other and not against each other. And from those thinking, we have such kind of very nice graphs how these things could work or could not work. But from my point of view, this is much more simple, because for me, this graph represents that it's impossible to understand the real linkages between different SDGs. Of course, we have to try, and we have to do it in some aspects. But what is more important, what kind of input we put in this system. That's what we can control. What kind of input, what kind, how much resource, for example, humanity use, That's the one of the most basic input if we think about environment. So I think that coherence is one of the key words when we think about SDGs and environmental issues nowadays. And if we are talking about environment, I have a hypothesis what I'd like to talk about, and that is that there is no absolute or permanent global, large and fast enough decoupling of economic growth from all critical environmental pressures. What does it mean? For decades, our environmental policies try to achieve that while we have economic growth, we decrease the environmental pressure. And that was a hope, or that was a wish for decades. And what we see nowadays, that we could not achieve it. And there is a very good study of European Environmental Bureau, Decoupling Debunked, which was published, I think, last year, which gives very good arguments why we haven't achieved this goal to not to link environmental pressure and economic growth. And those arguments in this publication is very good, and I'd like to shortly describe those arguments to you, because those are good. So 5 reasons why decoupling is not working. First, rising energy expenditures. When we extract resource, first cheaper options are used first. Then the extraction of the remaining stocks became much more resource and energy intensive. So that's what's happening nowadays. We have rising energy expenditures, and that's a huge problem. Also on conventional energy and also on renewable energy. The second one is the rebound effect, like efficiency, energy efficiency and other kind of efficiency are very important, but they are often partly or totally compensated by reallocation or the saved resources. So, for example, there is a energy improvement, and then the money saved are spent on more consumptions. For example, using a fuel efficient car more often, or other impactful consumptions, buying plane tickets for long holidays with the money saved on fuel. And it can also generate structural changes in the economy that also push for higher consumption. So while efficiency is very important, I would be cautious that this will bring the one of the main solutions. The other thing of nowadays environmental policies is problem shifting. While technological solutions to one problem can create new ones or making other ones bigger. One of the most obvious example for it nowadays are the electric vehicles, which puts pressure on lithium, copper, cobalt resources, and not just producing environmental, but also social problems, issues in developing countries. Other example could be that the biofuel, which raises a lot of concerns on land use. And also, for example, the nuclear power and the risks related to those nuclear power. So while we try to create solutions, several times we just make other problems bigger. Other reason why decoupling is not working is the underestimation of the impact of services. The service economy, with something that should bring the decrease of environmental pressure, can only exist on top of the material economy and not instead of it. So, and also services can have a very high significant footprint also, which also often adds than rather substitute other environmental pressures. Limited potential of recycling. While recycling is very important, we have to push for it. Recycling rates are currently low and only slowly increasing. So again, while it is important, we cannot think about it as the one and only solutions. And we have to admit that recycling is strictly limited, not just in its ability, but also it cannot provide enough resources to a growing, expanding material economy. And also recycling itself requires significant amount of energy to recycle as such. Insufficient and inappropriate technical change. So while innovation and technological progress is very important, it does not have a clear target. So it's not targeting the factors of productions that matter for ecological sustainability and not leading to the type of innovation that reduce environmental pressures. So only a small portion of innovation is leading the way we want, and majority of the innovations are not good from green point of view. Last but not least, the cost shifting. What has to be observed is the decoupling. In some local cases was generally only apparent decoupling resulting mostly from externalization of environmental impact from a high consumption society or country to a low consumption country. That can be territorial shifting, and there is also a technological shift. So those are the causes while the long-awaited decoupling is not working in our society. And those are just the issues linked and coherence issues linked with environment. And those are only limited coherence issues. We should also take into account agriculture, trade, social issues, health issues, education issues. So that is only creating this thing much bigger. And that's why I try to say that while we think about coherence, it's quite impossible to understand all aspects of our actions. That's why we should focus on something else. Talking about COVID, and I just came across a communication presentation, and it was made during spring, during summer, when we thought that there will be only one peak of COVID, and this presentation was about how we should communicate and how we should think about systemic change regarding COVID. So while there are a lot of cases, we can talk among ourselves, and that's what is happening now with you. And then when we have lesser cases, we have to push for our new solutions, and let's hope the society will be open for such kind of new solutions which can and may bring a new kind of economy after COVID. And that's one of the reasons why we as Friends of the Earth Hungary started a petition during spring. Probably you also felt that movement, that during spring everybody started to think about something new, and thought that maybe the whole society will start a totally new life after COVID. And we also, as Friends of the Earth Hungary, started to think and communicate about it, what kind of new society we should push for after COVID, because we have to see that there are no such kind of things that problem standing alone. Everything is linked. Even COVID is very clearly and very closely linked with sustainability issues. During spring, it was only an assumption. Now there are a lot of proofs that the COVID is linked with environmental problems, that we took much more territory from the nature than we should, and that's why we have much more interaction with animals than we should, and that's why there are much more diseases jumping from animals to humans. And so this is just a clear example that everything is linked. So our life-affirming society and economic petition is based on 4 pillars. And I think those are the main 4 areas where we should focus our efforts if you want to bring something new and more sustainable into the society. First of all, we should decrease our natural resource use. That's the first and most basic thing. We should not aim for emission reductions for 2030, 2050. That's just end of pipe solution. What is, as I said, what is the input to the system is the natural resource use, what we are using. And that's what we have to decrease from tomorrow. And then we can do that. I will give you a concrete idea solution for that in the next slide. Second one, localization instead of globalization. Of course, the problems are globalized. That's why we are here. Those are so huge that our activities here in Hungary have a huge impact also in Africa and other side of the world. But we think that, and we have to have a global movement and global solutions. The real solutions will be based on local solutions. The third issue, that most of the environmental and social problems are caused by our financial and economic system. So if we want to really change the environmental problems, if we want to stop environmental problems and social problems, we have to change our financial and economic system. And to change the financial and economic system, the financial and economic system is a human creation. So those are not what we got from God or from anywhere else. Those systems, financial and economic system, are based on our thinking and morals. So if we want to change environmental problems, financial and economic systems, we have to think about and we have to change about morals, and changing those for a better morals. And as said, I will bring you concrete solutions, and why it sounds good that we have to decrease our nature resource use. we also developed a concrete solution for that. Even we developed it more than 10 years ago when we proposed Climate Law Act in Hungary. Even we could achieve that the Hungarian National Assembly talk about it, this Climate Act, and talked about the concrete proposal. But at the end, it was not a success, so the parliament did not adopt it, this climate law. This climate law had 4 pillars. First pillar is non-renewable energy quota. So the total national non-renewable energy must be reduced year by year by a definite amount. And this would put a cap on our fossil fuel use for the whole society, and also for the public, and also for the companies. There would be energy quotas distributed, how much you can use, and those who save energy can sell their remaining allowances to those who need more quotas, and most probably the people who save energy on one hand would be environmental conscious persons, or poor persons who cannot allow to use more energy, and who are using much more energy. They are not environmental conscious and more rich. So there is also this social element in this. So we redistribute money within the country, on one hand, taking it into account social aspect, on another hand, taking into account environmental consciousness. Second pillar is a market for environmental friendly products and services. So if you save energy and you have remaining allowances or remaining quota, you one option that you are selling it, other option that you spend it on a market. And it's very important that it's a closed market. So when we are talking about, for example, solar panels, those are good products. Those could be on this closed market, but we would like to see that people in Hungary are buying Hungarian solar panels, people in Germany buying German solar panels, and not transported from China. So the aim of this market is to give a definite target for the innovation in Hungary, and a definite target for the economy in Hungary. So it's worth to invest in environmental conscious, in environmental friendly products. So what I've told you about the aim of the innovation, we would give a definite target for the innovation here, and we take that into account. Third one is the revolving fund. The revolving fund would provide 100% interest-free money, supporting for individuals as well as companies willing to invest in energy saving. So we would give money, interest-free loans to people and companies to invest, so they could use less energy. Because in the first years, you could switch off the light, take the heat off by 1 Celsius. But when we want to decrease the energy and the resource use at the later stage, you have to insulate your house, you have to have new windows, and we are giving money for the people. And this is revolving. So what is giving back, we can reuse it. And also this fund which you get from money which you get from this fund, you can only spend, of course, on environmental friendly products and services, green market. The fourth pillar, which is advisory service, which would provide information to the people. Because what I see nowadays, even nowadays, that people do not have the information which would allow them, for example, to insulate their houses according well and according to the up-to-date solutions. So this would be our solution, how we could decrease fossil fuel use. And we also developed an EU-wide system for it. It was called energy quota system, and you can also find it and learn about it on the internet. And all of it is based, as I said, on resource cap. That we should set a limit to our resource use, because that is the input to our system, and that is what is creating mostly all of the environmental problems, except two, I think. One is the nuclear energy. This system is not regulating the nuclear energy. And on the other hand, another issue which is not included in the system, important environmental problem, is the toxic materials. So beside, if you think about it, beside those two areas, this system would regulate and limit all other environmental problems. Going into even more concrete examples, I just brought you two examples, which I think that also taking into account environmental, social, and economical issues, and those solutions are good for all trees. One is the crowd farming. So when there is also closed market for local products, and linking directly the producers with the consumers. If you think about it, it's good for the economy, because the money stays locally, the resources stay locally. It's good for health, because you get healthy products from producers you know. So if there's any problem, you can know where it's coming from, and you can find solutions. And it's also good for the environmental. There are no long transport routes, and those farmers, those producers who are involved in such kind of initiatives are more environmental friendly. The other, even more concrete example is the Holtz 100 house. This is, if you check it on the internet, this is a house built from 100% wood. So there are no preservatives, there are no glue. It's a ready-made house. It can also produce locally, using locally wood. Of course, it's only perfect from environmental point of view if it's using local wood. But what is important, that if you are talking about climate change, you take out a lot of CO2 with this wood. So, forests are more or less good from a climate change point of view. But if you are burning the wood, you transfer again the CO2 to the system. But if you produce a house, environmental conscious, friendly house from that wood, you are taking those CO2 out of the system for a long time. So just two examples which are, I think, taking into account a lot of different aspects, and they are coherent from a lot of different point of view. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Ákos. Thank you very much for that. Was a lot of food for thought, a lot of ideas going into my mind there. Fantastic, thank you ever so much. Really interesting. I'm going to ask people if they have any questions to put them in the chat, and perhaps we'll come back a little bit later to follow some of those through. But some really interesting points there. This sort of interplay between local and global. And the sort of issues around that, as well as some of the I really liked the data that you called on to illustrate the points. Really interesting in relation to the SDGs. Absolutely fascinating. And, you know, that kind of key point about maybe not sort of setting environmental goals for the future, but actually looking at reducing consumption right now, perhaps as being even more important than setting goals for the future. Really interesting, absolutely fascinating. Thank you ever so much. And we'll collect some questions in chat, I'm sure, come back to you a little bit later. For those that are joining later, if you missed the first bit, there will be a recording going up on the project website a little bit later on. We're going to move on now, perfectly timed as well, thank you, Ákos, perfectly timed. We're going to move on to invite Davida from University of Padova to talk to us a little bit about how things have been working at University of Padova